Hello, work wife here. My name is Rachel. Welcome to my channel. And today's video is going to be about communication and how to communicate effectively. A lot of us think we know how to communicate, and then we forget the key second component to communication: comprehension. But before I dive into that, I am a workplace and mindset coach with nearly 20 years experience in the corporate world, having successfully navigated out of some serious toxic environments. So if you're dealing with such an environment, or a toxic boss or coworker, or just maybe you don't describe it as toxic, but it's just difficult and you're not prepared to say peace, email me at theworkwifellc@gmail.com, or hit me up on Instagram or TikTok, and I'd love to help. So a lot of times we think we are communicating effectively, if we've been, let's say, in the workforce a long time, whether it's written communication or spoken communication. But when it comes to interpersonal relationships, whether it be a coworker or boss, or even just regular personal relationships, romantic relationships, we think we have the skills with a Z. We think we have the skills to communicate, but oftentimes it's really about, you're more focused on getting your point across, and those active listening skills or intuitive skills are missing. We want to make our point, or not make a point, not say anything. We let our silence be our decision. And a lot of times we don't truly own our feelings when it comes to communicating. We make the other person wrong. We make them, they're deficient in some way. Well, you're not doing this and you're not doing that. And in part that may be true, but what I found through a lot of experience is, instead of it being, especially when it comes to sticky communications where you're trying to get through something tense or a conflict of some kind, the instinct to just make it about the other person, and you're not doing this and you're not doing that and you're not meeting my needs. Well, a lot of times we haven't even communicated what our needs are, or we don't even know. It kind of goes into the theme that I had in my video, I think it was last week, about being triggered, and how being triggered often is the other person's fault. You're triggering me. I don't like that. Stop triggering me. And then meanwhile, we don't do any investigation into why we're triggered in the first place. So that's in line with when we communicate, we're so busy to point out what the other person is doing or not doing, that we don't even really analyze, okay, well, what are my needs? What am I expecting of this other person? Am I making this other person responsible for my emotions? I know I've done that. And yes, if someone says something that's dismissive or unresponsive, or something that ends up being hurtful, one would hope that they would recognize that. Let's just stick with unintended hurt, not when you're trying to stick it to somebody, but unintended hurt, right? You say something dismissive, or you act dismissively of what the person is feeling or saying, and you have hurt feelings over it. You communicate that. You say, well, that was hurtful. But you don't really go into why. That was hurtful, never do it again. Or that bothered me, never do it again. You did this to me. Instead of leading with that, and I'm not saying to invalidate your own feelings or not feel the way you're feeling, but sometimes it involves saying, hey, this was why this was hurtful. Because then it gives the person an opportunity to go, okay, my intent in saying or doing that thing was certainly not to hurt you. This was the intent. It opens up the conversation. It opens up communication. But when we lead with, you did this to me, or you're causing me to feel this way, aka you're responsible for how I feel now, that does not open up the lines of communication. All that does is make people defensive. So they either become defensive in their speech and make things worse, or they just shut down entirely and they don't respond at all, which also can make things worse. Because if you're involved in a back and forth with somebody and they just show you a stone face, it makes you even more upset, because you're just you want a reaction, you want acknowledgement, you want validation. What did you do? What did you say that hurt me? And you want the person to acknowledge that. Meanwhile, they may not be able to, because they didn't intend to hurt you in the first place. So that's what I mean about comprehension. You can communicate till the cows come home. If they have no idea what you're talking about on a deeper level, you're never going to get there. It does require them to communicate that, though. That's the irony. If they don't get what you're talking about, then they need to say, I don't understand what you're talking about. I mean, maybe not like that, but you know what I mean. Like, I really, I didn't intend to hurt you. I didn't intend to hurt you. This is what I meant when I said X. It still may not make things magically better, but it's a start. Rather than that person becoming defensive and then you becoming even more defensive, and then your positions become even more entrenched. And then the conversation really goes nowhere. And so often what I suggest is leading with your feelings. Now, this does involve some degree of vulnerability. But if you don't want to use the word vulnerability, just say truth. This is the truth. Hey, this is the truth. I've had experience with this in this way, whether it be a previous job experience. I've been burned. This has just been my experience, so I'm extra sensitive to when someone says or does something that seems like that experience, so that's why I reacted that way. Instead of you did this. See the difference there? You're owning your feelings, which is twofold. You validate yourself instead of relying on the other person to validate you, but you also give them something to work with. So that they can say, now, this isn't a guarantee that they're going to give you what you're, that the conversation is going to be magically wonderful, but at least it's a start. This is how I feel because of this. This is what happened to me. So I'm extra sensitive about this. So I'm just telling you, this is why I reacted this way. It may not be rational to you, but it's rational to me because of this experience. And then they have that information to go, oh, I had no idea, which of course they're going to say, because they didn't have any idea. And they say, I'm sorry. Hopefully, they may not apologize, but they say, I acknowledge that, and I acknowledge what you're saying. That was not my intent. I meant it this way. And then hopefully you can have a real dialogue about that. And it doesn't have to be this deep dialogue. You don't have to talk for an hour about the thing, but at least it comes to a point of communication, hopefully comprehension, communication right back, and then you come to some sort of understanding at the very least, if not a resolution. So to me, what I've learned, we're so wired to make our experiences, especially negative experiences, other people's fault. And yes, people need to be responsible for their own actions towards us. But they cannot be responsible for our responses. They wouldn't know. They usually don't. They are responding to something in their environment, which is why they talk to you that way. And then you're responsible for your own reactions to that and being truthful and authentic with yourself about that. And then in turn, communicate that. If you're really having a hard time dealing with what someone said or did, you have to communicate that. Not communicating certainly doesn't help either, because all you're doing is you're just repressing it, or you're invalidating it yourself, or you're judging it. Well, I'm not going to say anything because I don't want to rock the boat. I'm not going to say anything because I don't want to deal with conflict. I'm not going to say anything because it's too big. I'm not going to say anything because I don't want to start anything with this coworker. I don't want to deal with it. Well, guess what? It didn't go anywhere. That reaction you had literally didn't go anywhere. Not dealing with it is not the same thing as removing it. So it's still there. You just pressed it down. And if you have enough of these moments, a lot of that pressing down, it's all going to come back up. That's what it does, because it's pressurized. So in this case, what goes down has to come up at some point. So I hope this was helpful. I think I'm going to talk a little bit more about communication in general, especially when it comes to dealing with difficult people, or not even difficult people, difficult situations. A lot of times we associate difficult situations with the same people, either because they're causing it or because of our own perspectives, and sometimes we have to show a little bit of compassion, not just for other people, but for ourselves in those situations. A lot of times these arguments happen or conflicts happen because people are having a bad day, a bad moment. Maybe they just had an argument with somebody else and you just stumbled into their sphere and had no idea what just happened. So you say something innocent and then they blast you and you're like, what the, you have no idea. So sometimes that bigger perspective does help when it comes to these situations. It does, it's hard sometimes to lead with compassion, but believe me, it makes a world of difference. So I hope you like this content. Please give it a thumbs up. I would love it if you would subscribe, hit that notification bell for future videos. And as I said, if you're having issues with a difficult situation, feel free to reach out to me. And until next time, stay cool, stay centered, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.